Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today. Please, just to get it out of the way, if we can silence all cell phones, especially with the TV crews here. My name is Muhammad. I am the Executive Director here at the Jerusalem Fund and Palestine Center. On behalf of our Board of Directors and staff, it's a pleasure to welcome you all here today, including everyone watching online on our live stream. It's also an honor to introduce and welcome our distinguished speaker, Ambassador Husam Zomlot, who will be speaking about the latest developments and next steps for Palestinians on the political and diplomatic fronts. As we all know, President Trump recently announced his decision to recognize Jerusalem as the undivided capital of Israel, along with plans to move the U.S. Embassy into Jerusalem. This is a major change in official U.S. policy. And with Jerusalem being such a core issue for Palestinians, this move has severe implications for future peace negotiations for any U.S. role in such talks. The Trump administration also recently made the unprecedented step of withholding millions of dollars in humanitarian aid to UNRWA for political reasons, which will of course impact critical service needed for Palestinian refugees. In light of these decisions, Ambassador Zomlot will speak about the latest developments taking place and a new Palestinian strategy for the future, including working within the framework of international law and through other diplomatic efforts. A little bit about the ambassador. He currently serves as the head of the General Delegation of the PLO to the United States and strategic advisor to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Ambassador Zomlot's previous roles include Ambassador at Large for the Palestinian Presidency and charged the affair of the Palestinian mission to the United Kingdom. He was elected to the Fatah Council and serves as Director of its Foreign Relations Commission. Ambassador Zomlot holds a PhD in economics from the University of London. He served as Professor of Public Policy at Birzeit University, where he co-founded and chaired the Birzeit School of Government. He also held teaching and research positions at Harvard University and the University of London. His professional experiences include working as an economist for the United Nations and economic researcher with the London School of Economics and the Palestine Economic Policy Research Institute. Ambassador Zomlot is also married and has 2 children. The ambassador will speak for 30 to 40 minutes, after which we will have a Q&A session. We ask that you please wait for the mic to come by so that everyone online can hear you. And for the online audience, you can ask questions through Twitter. You can tweet them to @Palestine Center. Without further ado, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Ambassador Husam Zomlot.
Thank you very much, Akhi Muhammad, and thank you all for coming today and attending this event. It's a testament of how much you care about the issue of Palestine, the issue of justice, and I see many friends in this room. It is an utmost honor for me personally today to be at the Jerusalem Fund and a privilege to speak at an institution founded by the honorable Palestinian scholars, the likes of the late Dr. Hisham Sharabi and the late Dr. Samih Farsoon, both highly respected academics, pioneers that their work paved the way for the Palestinian-American experience by providing a framework for advancing the Palestinian human rights in the U.S. and within the U.S. civil society. For us, and this is important to say, taking this opportunity, the Jerusalem Fund is a Palestinian icon of perseverance. We are a people that know too well the price of being forcibly expelled from our homeland. Yet it is institutions like this institution that have kept us strong and together all these years. And for the director, for the board of this very important place, I take this opportunity on behalf of the people and leadership of Palestine to thank you for the many years of service and for standing firm for the rights of the Palestinian people in the United States of America. Mohammed, thank you, and give a hand, please, to the Jerusalem Fund. And I know you are much more also interested in the following President Trump's remarks recently and decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and the decision to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, there have been ever since then several critical developments in the political sphere concerning the political process and the Palestinian-U.S. relationship, and a lot of commotion, I have to say, on what will happen next. I therefore wanted to clarify some key points where we stand at this point in time and describe what we think are the options in front of us. Because this is not just about what has happened, it is also about what should happen and what might happen in the future, and our collective thinking in this arena. And I'm certain that most of you who came today would want to know more about where are we going, where do we stand today, where are we going, and how do we intend to reach that destination. What is crucial for us at this point in time is that we, no matter where no matter what is our strategy, what is our next step, we must base these steps on very rooted, clear foundations, principles, pillars, so we are not lost in our journey. It is crucial that from the very beginning we outline our commitments that should shape and inspire our strategy. And here, as we all care about Palestine and the region and want a bright future for all the people of the region, we may differ, and particularly Palestinians among ourselves, which is legitimate. We may differ on the routes, the roads, the means, the tools to how to get to our destination. But we definitely do not differ on our objectives. We are united there on where we have to go and where we need to reach. But it is important at this point in time to call a spade and diagnose the situation the way it is, not the way we wish it to be. For a doctor doesn't treat cancer by diagnosing it or pretending to be a flu. And I happen to have a flu, so bear with my voice. It's not a cancer. Of course, it is human nature to be afraid of the unknown. All of us get to be concerned about the lack of clarity, especially at these times of uncertainty. We don't like not knowing, and we don't like not having control, and we don't like to feel inadequate, all of us. But as we wise-centered beings, human beings, as responsible citizens, and as a people with a cause and a calling, we conjure hope and must. We garner our strength, especially now at this point in time. And we embark on facing head-on all these hurdles by conquering our fears, first and foremost. We, as a nation, are solid in our belief that ultimately we will reach and achieve our internationally endorsed rights. We must be cautious but fearless about the future. And before I delve into those, I want to reiterate our positions. The Palestinian position, the position of the people and the leadership of Palestine, to make sure that what I say is taken with that backdrop or frame of reference, if you will. Number one, we are committed to international law. We are committed to international legitimacy. We don't do this out of a need to curry favor. with anyone, but of a solid conviction in the importance of respecting and maintaining an international order. No matter how difficult and delicate that order may seem at times. And it is definitely not in its best shape as we speak now. In a world that is being and becoming ever more interconnected and interdependent, isolationism becomes a recipe for anarchy. We are the people of Palestine and the leadership of Palestine. We are for internationalism. We are for multilateralism. For us, international law, international consensus, and international resolutions means the following three key principles as far as Palestine is concerned. The first principle is that Israel's occupation that began in 1967 of Palestinian territory must end. That is included clearly in the UN Security Council resolutions 242, 338, all the way to 1 year ago, UN Security Council resolution 2334. Emphasizing all of these resolutions, emphasizing the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war. International law is clear cut. Clear. Second principle that we adhere on as far as the international side of the story is establishing a sovereign, independent state of Palestine on this liberated territory, including East Jerusalem, all of it, complete as the capital of the state of Palestine. This is not what we say. This is what the successive international resolutions, including the US co-sponsoring and voting for them. Yes. The third principle, resolving the issue of Palestinian refugees. More than 6 million of them today, myself included. I was born in a refugee camp. And our president, President Abbas, included. The issue of refugee is the origin of the Palestinian cause. It's the heart of the matter. And guess what? There is also clarity in international law, international resolutions about the issue of refugees, international responsibility, and the way to resolve it. There are standards, and we are no exception. There are so many other issues, other countries that have faced issues of refugeeship, including Kosovo recently. So we also want to consider international standards when it comes to the issue of refugees. And not only we accept and recognize and adhere to international legitimacy, not only by words, but by deeds. We have done our part. By in 1988, declaring an independent state of Palestine on the 1967 borders. That was following international legitimacy. That was implementing international legitimacy. By recognizing in 1993 formally the State of Israel on the 1967 borders. However, we did not recognize an unidentified Israel, which since 1967 did not stop for a day expanding its illegal colonial expansion deep into the occupied territory. The question is not when will there be peace in the Middle East, but rather when international resolutions, more than 83 UN Security Council resolutions for Palestine, on the conflict, 83 UN Security Council resolutions, unimplemented. More than 700 UN General Assembly resolutions, unimplemented. The question is when international resolutions will be implemented. Then peace will prevail in the Middle East. And let us be absolutely crystal clear here. The two-state solution was never for negotiations. We did not accept international resolutions to negotiate the principles of these resolutions. We accepted international resolutions for implementation of international will. It was never up for a further compromise. We would never negotiate the principle of ending occupation, or the principle of establishing a sovereign state of Palestine, or the principle of the right of return for the refugees. We were looking for mechanisms and timetables for implementation. And our acceptance of international resolutions, i.e. the two-state solution on the 1967, was never, ever a Palestinian demand. It was a Palestinian concession. If the international community says that conceding 78% of your land will deliver peace, we want to consider it. The second commitment of us, the Palestinians, after international law and international system, is our commitment to nonviolence. We believe our cause is just. Our demands are reasonable, and our time has come. Popular resistance, mass movement, is what we are adopting. And it is not a coincidence that Ahmed Tamimi is now a Palestinian icon. It is not a coincidence that many of the leaders of the popular resistance, peaceful popular resistance, have been rounded in Israeli jails over the last few years. You have seen that dignified mass protest, mass prayer in Jerusalem only a few months ago, in July. Our mindset, our culture, our decision-making process is all in this arena. It is crucial that we engage in where we are best. We retain the moral high ground. And we engage the entire nation of Palestine. And mass peaceful protest does. And it is also in the nonviolence our right and our obligation to revert to international political and legal system. It is our obligation. We have to revert to the UN Security Council, to the General Assembly, to all the international organs, all of them, political and legal. It's not a revenge. We're not joining the mafia. We're joining the UN. So our ability to resist using international mechanisms is a right and an obligation, and we will not let go of this process. Our third commitment, with all the difficulties, is to a democratic process in Palestine. To build our state institutions as well. We will not let go of us being on the ground. We won't. Our skin has been there. And we will not let go of our most important weapon, if you may, that is democracy. Legitimacy of representation. People's sacred right to vote in their governments and representatives. I know, given what has happened over the last years, this sounds difficult. But difficult it is. It is not a choice for us Palestinians. It's a destiny. Difficult it is. We cannot but revert back to the people of Palestine. And I know that the reconciliation process has been slower than expected since the recent agreement in Cairo. Sometimes national processes need time, especially when the issues discussed are big, crucial, deep. Sometimes taking time is not a bad indicator. It might be actually a good indicator. We are delving deep. And we are not rushing only for the sake of striking a deal. But for every Palestinian, we know without our unity in the political sense, we can disagree. Without our unity in the political sense, our situation would be much more difficult. There was one agreement in Cairo a couple of months ago between all the Palestinian political factions. That agreement was to convene national elections by the end of 2018, this year. Hopefully this will happen, and hopefully we will all converge towards that direction. But believe you me, with all the difficulties we face, our commitment to a democratic political system must be unwavering. We cannot face up all the challenges if we don't have the power of the people and representing the people. But then let me move very quickly to the 6th of December 2017 and the announcement by President Trump, that sudden and unilateral announcement, which in our opinion has violated three major commitments. The first is the US long-held policy. Since President Truman until the 6th of December 2017. The US policy has been very clear. It's with UN Security Council resolutions 242, 338. It's with the ending of occupation. It's with always considering the occupation to be illegal and the settlement building to be illegal. That was a U-turn on the long-held US policy, a sudden U-turn. The second violation is of President Trump himself, his promise. Because since we started the discussion with this administration, and we were saying that it's important that you return to the long-held US policy about the two-state solution, about the international contours, they would tell us that they don't want to impose anything on any party. They would tell us that they don't want to dictate. They want the two sides to decide. So you promise that, and then you start taking an issue after another. The core of the issues, the mother of all issues, Jerusalem, and later on refugees, because the attack on UNRWA has to do with the issue of refugees, rather it's not a financial transaction. And the third is not to preempt and predetermine the outcome of negotiations. And if you remember what President Trump said in Davos only last week, that Jerusalem was the most difficult issue, he said. He's right there. Jerusalem was the most difficult issue because for us, it's the sticking point. That's why it's the most difficult. For us, no state of Palestine without East Jerusalem, its capital. For us, Jerusalem is not just a city, it's our identity. It's our campus. It's our national hub. In every sense, in the historic sense, in the religious sense, in the cultural sense. It's even our hub for services, for medical services, for education. And Jerusalem is not a city we claim. Jerusalem is a city we own. It's not a claim from above. It's a claim from below, from the ground, from the root, from the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in Jerusalem who own every home, every shop, every church, every mosque. Well, there are four things that President Trump mentioned in Davos. The first is taking Jerusalem off the table. Well, we have said this and we say it again today. President Trump has taken the table off altogether. No Palestinian will sit on that table. No Palestinian will sit on that table. And I want to see any other leader who can look us in the eye and say that they represent the people of Palestine. I want to see any Arab leader who say that they can sit on such a table. We, the Palestinian people, might not be the strongest of nations, but we know our rights and we know the limits of diplomacy, and we know exactly when to say no. And we are the only agency that represents the cause of Palestine. You want to go and search somewhere else? Good luck. The keys to peace is with the people of Palestine and with the leadership of Palestine. No matter where else you are going to look, no matter how many plots and conspiracies you are going to employ. And the second thing that was mentioned by President Trump is that we walked away from negotiations. What negotiations? What negotiations we have walked from? Since we engaged President Trump, we have been saying we're ready. This is an opportunity. There was never an offer of negotiations. There was never an offer of a timeline of engagement. There was no plan to start with. What negotiations are we walking away from? But this is a movie we have seen many times. It's boring, actually. The Palestinians walked away from negotiations. We have been on the table for 26 years. I don't think there has been any issue that has been negotiated more than our issue. It even suffers from a syndrome of over-negotiation. Too much negotiations. We did not, Mr. President, walk away from negotiations. It is the administration that has walked away from the table. Because there will not be any other table without the key principles on it. It's the administration that took the chair and left the room altogether as a mediator. We are here. We've gone nowhere. We did leave nothing. The third thing he mentioned is that the Palestinians have been disrespectful. We have been respectful of four things. The first is our own people. And self-respect for us comes first. The Palestinian people first. And we have a vivid nation, very active nation, rooted, diverse, and it is the people of Palestine that we are answerable for, nobody else. The second, we have respected the international consensus by refusing these terms. The third respect we have done is to the US itself, to the US long-held policy, and to the majority of the American people who, according to all polls, have been against the Jerusalem decision and the Jerusalem announcement. And lastly, that funding will be cut from the US funding to the Palestinian Authority, the US funding to Palestine. Let me say this. US funding that has been there for so many years, we appreciate every penny, every dollar. But that funding was not really a gift. That funding was part of a US vision. That funding was part of a US commitment. That funding was part of a US interest. That funding was part of an international and US obligations. It makes sense that the US funds its own vision of building two states on the 1967 borders. The US has invested in the infrastructure of peace for all these years. And we appreciate it. But financial pressure doesn't work, especially when it comes to people like ours. It doesn't work. It's been tried before. It didn't work, and it will not work this time. If it does anything, it adds to our sense of pride and sense of resilience, if you may, against this wave. Coercive political agendas cannot be implemented by means of political pressure or weaponizing aid, if you may. Is that a term I can use? It doesn't work. Weaponizing financial assistance doesn't work. And then after Jerusalem, the US freezes funding from UNRWA. I mean, denying people's education and healthcare. I was educated at an UNRWA school. And UNRWA has really been able to turn a catastrophic situation into less catastrophic, only a little bit less catastrophic. Giving people and children like me at the time the opportunity, the platform to be educated and to lead a different future. But please go back to Netanyahu's remarks, including very recently, and you will find the actual purpose of this vicious attack on UNRWA. Netanyahu said that UNRWA perpetuates the issue of refugees. So he thinks, i.e. Netanyahu, that by dismantling UNRWA, the issue of refugees will vanish. It's a fallacy. But it does exist in Netanyahu's head, that fallacy. I have news to Netanyahu and to the Israeli government. Whether UNRWA exists or not, the right of millions of Palestinian refugees are not linked to UNRWA. It's UNRWA that is linked to them achieving their internationally endorsed rights. That's the first news. So UNRWA is there to sustain their living until their rights are achieved. And the second, our commitment to UNRWA is firm, and the international community's commitment to UNRWA is firm. And under no circumstances, UNRWA will fail to uphold its own responsibility. I received senior representatives of UNRWA in our office only a couple of days ago. And the main statement I received is that their commitment and their mandate will be fulfilled. Okay, we are here today. So let's go back to the original statement by President Trump. In his first meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu in February, President Trump said, and I quote, "One state, two states, I am happy with whatever the two sides are happy with." He said that. And we agree with him. We agree with him. We agree with President Trump. There are only two possible solutions. He's right. Either partition, two states on the 1967 borders, not even based on the 1967 borders. That's the first option, which has been endorsed by the international community and the US successive administrations. Or a one state that is egalitarian, democratic, and that gives full equal rights for all of its citizens, regardless of their color or creed or religion or language. Full equal rights in the historic land of Palestine. That's the second option. President Trump is right. We now, the people and the leadership, are with the two-state solution on the 1967 borders. We are with it for implementation, not for negotiations. We are with it because we believe it's the possible, knowing that in Israel it's a non-starter, the idea of a one-state solution. We are still with it. However, we realize that Netanyahu's government actively seeks to destroy not only the present possibility of a two-state solution on the 1967 borders, but actually the future discussion of this solution altogether. The Netanyahu government is involved in removing the tracks of the two-state solution. How else would you interpret the ruling party's, the Likud, decision only a few weeks ago to annex the West Bank? How else do we translate the Knesset passing a law not to negotiate Jerusalem unless 80 members vote, which is practically an impossibility? Oslo was passed by only 61 votes, the threshold. How else do we explain that Netanyahu has taken pride only a few months ago publicly that he's the first prime minister in Israel in 20 years to build a new settlement deep in the West Bank? So proud about it. How else do you explain what he said only 2 days ago, 2 or 3 days ago, when he went to open a new road deep in the occupied territory, deep in the West Bank? What did he say? Netanyahu said, this settler-only bypass road is part of the system of settler bypass roads that are building throughout Judea and Samaria, which is the occupied West Bank, that serves the residents, settlers of Judea and Samaria, and the residents of the State of Israel, i.e. linking the West Bank to Israel via a system of infrastructure and a system of roads. This is not a government that is rejecting the two-state solution by words. This is a government that is rejecting the two-state solution by deeds. Action. Every day. Murdering the possibility. Burying it deep in the ground. And it is not circumstantial evidence we are talking about. It's clear, it's unambiguous. And people forget just not to focus only on the Netanyahu government. People forget that the Israeli Prime Minister back then, Ishaq Shamir, came kicking and screaming to the Madrid peace conference. They didn't like it. It was only after President Bush Sr., father, threatened to withhold $10 billion that he came, i.e. Shamir, kicking and screaming. And Shamir famously said back then that, and by the way, Shamir is Netanyahu's mentor. This is something Netanyahu says. Shamir was saying, I would have conducted negotiations on autonomy for 10 years. And in the meantime, we would have reached 500,000 settlers. That was 1991. In the West Bank. He was right on the number of settlers. They even exceeded the 500,000. Much more exceeded the 500,000. They did better. They stole more land than Shamir expected. They colonized more towns than Shamir expected 25 years ago or 26 years ago. But he was wrong on the number of years. It wasn't 10 years. They left us and kept us in this process for 26 years. But with the same logic, Palestinians walk out of negotiations while they were doing the real job, the real intention. They wanted to establish a process that was lasting process, not lasting peace. They created a process that was actually designed to prevent the outcome. Designed to prevent the outcome. As far as we are concerned, the two-state solution and the terms of the two-state solution are clear. And I'd like to repeat this. They are not up for negotiations. They are only up for implementations. And we are ready to sit on an international table, multilateral table, where the world sits there. And this is not the exception. This is the rule. For all other conflicts, it was an international table to implement international resolutions. We were made the exception for 26 years. We were told Kosovo requires multilateralism. East Timor requires multilateralism, internationalism. South Africa requires internationalism. Iran and the Iranian deal requires multilateralism. Except you. Only the two sides can resolve the issue. Here you go. There is one side that is clear about their intention. When President Trump said that we are fine with the two-state solution if the two sides want it, effectively, we want it. We demand it. We endorse it. Effectively, it gives the veto power to the party that is unwilling. No one can love peace more than the two sides. Said who? Think the audience in this room would love peace as much as we do. The whole idea is just to leave the two sides with this asymmetry of power in one room. So it's not a process of rights, but a process of diktats. It's not a process of right, but a process of might. We're done with that. 26 years is a generation. My generation, actually. Enough. Enough. And I say it here in the heart of Washington and in the Palestine Center. Enough. Our rights are not up for sale. Our principles are set, enshrined in international legitimacy. And in the hearts of the millions of our people, and who are not any other people. I mean, let's remember, this is a very proud nation, very rooted. Everything started there. Don't blame us for that. But we exported to you almost all prophets. The oldest human community is in Jericho. Okay, so if this is the situation for the two-state solution, the first is that the current Israeli government, all the way back to Shamir, and by the way, not to just blame the right wing in Israel, because the right wing in Israel is very clear. The Likud and now all the parties to the right of the Likud, like, Israel, Baytuna and all these parties, they are very clear. They say, what is yours, what is mine? They say, what is mine is mine, and what is yours is mine. They say it. Clearly, by the way. The center-left in Israel, since we started the Madrid peace process, all the way to Oslo, to the roadmap, starting from what is mine, and what is yours is negotiable. We will sit and negotiate what is yours. So all of Israel never took the 1967 formula as a formula for implementation, but as a formula, as a starting point for grabbing more. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. For a nation that has been able to concede 78% of what is its own land for the sake of peace, it's unacceptable to consider further compromises. And it will not happen. The 1967 formula is not just a Palestinian peace agenda. It is now a national equilibrium. No one can touch it. But given that, and given the clarity of the current administration that they are not going to endorse the two-state solution clearly, and in our opinion, this dangerously plays in the hand of the Netanyahu government. Given this situation, President Trump mentioned the one state. This is interesting, really interesting and important. I wish the US had mentioned this before our 1988 declaration, because that was our position, by the way, before 1980. Before we accepted international legitimacy, our platform was one democratic state. Remember? The PLO. Fine, they mention it now. One state for all of its citizens with full equal rights. Palestinians accepted the two-state solution as a concession, as we said, because of the international community was oriented around that idea. So if this administration has ideas for a one-state solution, we are interested to hearing what they have. We are. In the end, we want full rights like everyone else. And we are impartial about how we get there. It's not just about the journey, it's about the destination. However, if one state solution envisaged is a disguised apartheid or an apartheid in disguise, in one form or another, it will be rejected. And we must save our efforts and not repeat history again. This has been tried elsewhere. And it has been tried before, and it came to a crashing defeat. Needless I say, Mandela and South Africa. Needless I say, Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. It's very simple equation. Either we all have equal rights, or none of us have. Rights are not subdivided. You cannot subdivide rights. Or selective. That's called apartheid. And we are fully human. Fully human. Right? Not 3/5. Human. We are fully human. And today, by the way, marks the first day of the Black History Month in the US. Let us remember. So please, when you hear someone arguing like Netanyahu, we will give the Palestinians a state minus. Nothing will be minus about us. Either full sovereignty on the entire land that Israel occupied in 1967, or full equal rights in the historic land of Palestine. For every citizen. We will not accept a system that is there to privilege one group over another. We've lived that and experienced that long enough. And, I know there will be interesting discussion, and I'm not going to go on, but let me try to conclude by saying this. The Israeli government is absolutely delusional if it thinks that the transactional approach to the international community, to the issue of negotiations, to the situation in the Arab world is going to take it anywhere. Delusional. And they are also delusional about where the moral arc of history is bending. Either they don't want to see, or they are just blocking what is happening actually. Prime Minister Netanyahu can speak at the Congress, but do you think he can go and speak at a university in California or Wisconsin? No. Because the arc of history always bends towards justice. And let me be clear by way of ending here. Let me be clear that we don't want to end an injustice by creating another injustice. We don't. We have tasted the bitter taste of injustice. We don't wish to inflict injustice on anybody. We want a bright future for the Israeli kids as much as we want it for our own kids. For better or worse, our fates are intertwined and intertwined and interconnected. Our futures are. We know that. As is the fate of all our world that is smaller and more independent every day and getting smaller. Israel isn't safer or more prosperous when it is inflicting indescribable pain and horror on millions of people under its control. It isn't safe. That is a recipe for continued pain and suffering for both of our peoples that has gone on for a long time. This irresponsible living by the sword mentality, mindset, strategy will get us nowhere. It will not secure our future and will only destroy the basis of coexistence. We hope that the Israelis will listen to their better angels rather than their current politicians. And I know they will ultimately. We definitely know they will ultimately. We are all the sons and the daughters of Abraham. We are. And the battle is not between those siblings, but between those who want to split this family and those who want to bring it together in peace and harmony. And I believe now by numbers and by the solidarity of the international community and by the structural change that is happening in America, more American people are to the side of the truth. We see it in the campuses, we see it in the polls, we see it among the Jewish community and the youth of the Jewish community. We see it everywhere we go, that the tide is going towards supporting the just cause of Palestine. Therefore, I believe that the ultimate goal of reaching peace and harmony in the land of Palestine will be achieved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. That was a great presentation. In the interest of time, please, we're going to open the floor to questions and answer. Please keep your questions brief and to the point so that everybody can get a chance.
Thank you, Mohammed. Yes, my name is Saeed Erekat, and I have a very quick question for you. Do you believe that the listing of the head of the Hamas Politburo on the terror list in any way destroys the efforts conducted by the PLO and by the PA at reconciliation? Thank you.
I guess we'll take a few questions.
Thank you very much, Benjamin, to a retired diplomat. Mr. Ambassador, could you speak to the unintended consequences of Mr. Trump's decision, perhaps even some intended consequences? The organization of the Islamic Conference, it's got a slightly different name now, has declared that it supports East Jerusalem as the capital of the State of Israel. The European Union does. Russia, even before Mr. Trump's statement, said the same thing about East Jerusalem being the capital of the future Palestinian state. And his action has reinvigorated discussion about this and essentially made clear that the U.S. has abandoned its role as the lead player in the so-called peace process, and maybe there will be now a genuine peace process. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I understand that the PLO now is for a unified state in Palestine and Israel together, and not a two-state solution?
I'd like to add a question as well. Among some of the decisions, there's been the threat to close the PLO office here in Washington. Is there any development with that issue?
Well, about listing Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas, on the terrorist list, you know, Saeed, do you know that even the PLO that has been engaged in peace process via the invitation of the US since 1991, we have signed the Oslo agreements in the White House. We have entered into several bilateral agreements with the US. The US has been paying $700 million at one point to establish the state of Palestine. Israel has recognized formally the PLO as the legitimate sole representative of the Palestinians. With all that, still in the US law, the PLO is a terrorist organization. Since 1987, it didn't change. No one has the guts or the courage or the wisdom to just come and revisit that law. So this isn't about just Ismail Haniyeh, and this isn't just about this situation. The whole legislation in the U.S. Congress and the whole way of looking at us needs to change, I have to say. And I'll stop at that. Well, that's not a function of how the U.S. lists anybody. That's a function of the Palestinian national requirements and the function of the Palestinian people and their demands, and a function of our commitment to a democratic process and renewing our democratic process, and a function of always making sure that territorially also Gaza and the West Bank is one territorial entity. So ending the division and regaining control of Gaza and making sure that we have one government and we have one rule of law comes before any other consideration. The second question about the role of the international community practically, and that Russia and that the European Union and all those are still recognize the 67 borders, still recognize East Jerusalem as an occupied city. Yes, that's why we are saying that now the only alternative is a multilateral forum. And we find these countries that you've just listed, including Europe, China, Russia, Africa, Latin America, these are very important players. You cannot just exclude major countries. I'll give you one example. Europe has more leverage on us, both Israel and Palestine, in real terms than America. The biggest trading partner of Israel is Europe, it's not the US. And the biggest donor to the Palestinians is not America, it's Europe. By far, by the way, you're not talking about just a small little difference, by far. And we don't border the shores of the U.S., the east shores of the U.S., or even the west for that matter. We border Europe. Europe has a geopolitical interest because whatever happens hits its borders immediately, like what happened in Syria and the issue of refugees. So Europe is crucial in being on the table. So is other major international countries. The problem was in the exclusion in the first place. And we hope what happened in the last few weeks would give that argument and that logic support, that there is no way but for an international table to implement international resolutions. The third question about the one-state solution. Let me be very clear. We believe that the two-state solution on the 1967 borders, with all the international contours, is the best way forward. We believe so, sir. We believe sometimes that you may have to cut the land to save your child, party the land. And we believe, given the dynamics in Israel now, and given how the Israeli society has been evolving, to think that Netanyahu is causing what is happening in Israel is a mistake. Netanyahu is the outcome because he was elected on certain promises. And to think at this point in time, the Israeli society in general is going to be open for the discussion of egalitarian system for all. We are also oriented not only of having peace after 1,000 years. I want my little daughter to live a different future and to experience different reality. We are also at the pressure of time to implement a possible vision for peace. However, what I was saying is, should this vision continue being murdered, buried by Netanyahu and co., should this vision continue to be not supported directly, straightforwardly, absolutely by the US administration, then we want to explore the other option that we want to hear. We want to listen. What does President Trump mean when he says one state? If he means one man, one vote in the historic land of Palestine, we will listen. If he means a democratic system, constitutional arrangement, Bill of Rights that guarantees the right of every citizen, we will listen. If he means that the people in that area will decide collectively on their state and capital and future and their international relations, we will listen. We will listen. We are not against this form of solution. Who said we were never against it? What we were against is the lack of a solution in the first place. And we believed in 1988 that we must drop that platform for the sake of allying ourselves with international legitimacy, hoping that that alliance with international resolution will fasten the process of implementing the peace vision. That's the formula. We wanted the international community to play the role of the equalizer, to equalize the equation. So what I was trying to say today very clearly, in the absence of a clear-cut commitment to the two-state solution, and there is enough evidence of that absence, we are here, all ears, and want to listen. How's that?
Very good.
We want to listen. That's the meaning. We want to listen. And I'll tell you, we are not oriented towards one form of a solution. We are oriented towards a solution. About closing the PL office, actually, only a few days ago, I was reading some Israeli media leaked the discussion between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu in Davos, and it was mentioned that Netanyahu also asked for the closure of the PLO office in Washington. And there was also some news in September that was also in the Israeli media that Netanyahu endorsed a plan in his cabinet to actually close the PLO office in Washington. So it's all there. You can see the news. I think in Netanyahu's head, he is after the liquidation of the Palestine issue. And he thinks by taking Jerusalem off the table, then taking refugees off the table, then bringing down a flag from the heart of Washington, he will simply achieve his... It's more than just an office. It's the symbolism of that office. It's what that office represents. It represents the collective political aspirations of a righteous people. It represents decades of struggle to get an embassy and an office here and an official representation. They don't even like to see a flag of Palestine flying in the heart of Washington. But I have news for Mr. Netanyahu. First of all, it's obvious that the United States and us have a very deep-rooted relationship, bilateral, independent of what Israel wants. And there is sufficient will. You remember that the administration has actually worked the situation out, backtracking from the original decision that was in November, allowing us to continue here and allowing the bilateral relationship as a very important line of communication to continue. But I have news for Mr. Netanyahu. If he keeps pressuring in that area, even if he manages to bring or close an office or an institution, this will be a Palestinian home, and there are thousands of Palestinian homes and addresses and flags. They are delusional. They are delusional if they think, if you attack UNRWA, the issue of 7 million refugees, 7 million will just go away. They are delusional if, an announcement by the US president about Jerusalem will take away Jerusalem. Take away Jerusalem? I mean, I was in Jerusalem only 3 weeks ago. And I went, and I wanted to see what changed. Nothing changed. Jerusalem East is still occupied by military force. The people are still speaking Arabic with a beautiful Palestinian accent, by the way. They still open their shops, and you want to go and smell the beautiful ancient smell of za'atar and herbs and what have you. And the knafe is even becoming more delicious now. People own Jerusalem. They own it. Nothing changed, and nothing will change, I assure you. Nothing will change. The only thing that changed is that Mr. Trump and the US administration has decided willingly to walk out of that negotiation table. To walk out being mediator, sole mediator for all these years. Nothing will change about our rights. And the main line of protection for us, the main line of defense is the people there. Okay, with all due respect to the international legitimacy, international law that we are allied with. But you've seen the people of Jerusalem only a few months ago. Only when Netanyahu tried to elect electronic gate. Let alone if somebody comes and tells them, this is not your city. This is not your heritage. This is not your history. This is not your narrative. This is not your identity. Hell to all that.
So, why then does the Palestinian Authority continue to cooperate on security in helping to police and silence the will of the Palestinian people?
You have to distinguish between our ability to maintain a non-violent confrontation and what you just described as preventing people from demonstrating. No, people have been demonstrating with the full support of the leadership, as happened in July in Jerusalem, and as happened in so many other areas, from Bil'in to Na'lin to all these wonderful examples. The latest warriors of popular resistance are all members of the Fatah, members of the PA itself, by the way, and they have been rounded and imprisoned only in the last few weeks. No, but we don't want the curse of blood. We don't want it. We are not bluffing when we say our commitment to a non-violent way of engaging the occupation. We mean it. Sir, we mean it. Some would say that, this is really being part of the status quo. No, this is challenging the status quo. Violence does not work. It doesn't help us. We are a nation with a calling and rights and international support. For too long, this has been confused with us curbing on resistance. No, we call on mass, peaceful, non-violent resistance.
But why not do it yourself and not do it with the Israelis?
Go and see all those who have been leading the effort recently. Check their names and their families, including Ahid Tamimi, and see our support. But it's a very complicated matter. A nation must always look and find where it is strongest. And we are not the strongest in the military arena. We are not. We are strongest in the moral arena, in the political arena, in the legal arena. Why do we always want to engage Tyson in the boxing ring? He'll eat your ear. And in this regard, Israel has no limits because it is shielded and protected. Blaming the Palestinian leadership and the authority, and not blaming the international system for giving this long exercise and practice of immunity. So we want to shield our people as well. We don't want to see our children being slaughtered with no accountability. Slaughtered. Today, as I was driving here, I saw the disheartening news of 7 innocent people in Gaza losing their lives and tens of injuries and casualties. Why? Because there was some sort of a gas leak and an explosion. This should have been averted. The inhumane treatment of Gaza for decades is because of a twisted mentality, not by the Palestinian leadership or the people of Palestine. A regime that has seen the complicity and the complacency of so many. It's unbearable. A war after another, right in front of the eyes of the world, bombarding entire neighborhoods, burying children, babies. We don't want to bring suffering on our people. We don't. And we consider to be the human soul, the human being, to be our most important asset. We don't want dead Palestinian heroes. We want free and alive Palestinian heroes. Free and prosperous. Free and educated. If you blame us for that, bring it on.
Thank you for your remarks. I'm Peter Shutley, a retired State Department Foreign Service, and also I'm on ANERA's board. And my question is, many American congressmen, senators visit Israel. Not very many go on to the West Bank. And so my question is, can you describe for us a little bit about your efforts to have members of Congress get a clearer picture of what the situation is?
Yes, this is an important question, and you're right. The way that the truth has been blocked here, and the concerted effort to actually make sure that there is only one side of the coin presented, one side of the narrative and the story, and that side is not even the Israeli side. It's a distorted minority who has the money and the organization. We haven't been doing as much in that arena in the last few decades, but that's not because we don't want to receive them. But things have been changing. In the last few years, we have been receiving several senior U.S. Congress delegations. Several. I myself, before I became the ambassador here, I myself received several U.S. senators, congressmen, when I was the strategic advisor of President Abbas over the last year and the year before. And this is beginning to happen. I don't want to reveal much, but there is now a concerted effort and a program to send as many. And there is much more interest, because in the past, I think many of the congressmen and women would not find it easy to do so. Now they do. Things have changed. In the past, some of them will consider it to be a political suicide. Now they don't. And I assure you one thing, things are changing in the Congress. Ever since I arrived, I've been visiting the Congress almost on a daily basis, meeting all the real representatives right across the board, Republicans and Democrats, the senior heads of committees, and what have you. Things are changing. And the change of the public opinion in America is also reaching and being translated to the Congress. When presidential candidates were competing, some of them were supporting Palestinian rights, and guess what? They got more votes. Without mentioning names.
About time.
Yeah, even President Trump himself, when he was going around during the Republican race, and he said at the heartland of the evangelical movement, I'll be neutral, they kept voting for him because their priorities are, Israel number 4, number 5, which is a testament that things are changing. Things are changing. And somebody asked me about closing the office here or doing all that. It's part of them, the Israeli government, realizing that things are changing. They wanted to abruptly shut it down. They see where the wheels of history are going. They see it. And they want to insert poison, suspicion in the body of the growing Palestinian-American relationship, in the growing public opinion awareness, in the coup d'etat among the youth about what is happening, thanks to the social media, by the way, and the alternative sources of media. So, you're right. We have a homework to do. We need to do it, and this is the moment. Time is, I have been saying to our community all over, the Palestinian community, that we believe that this is our moment in America for 3 reasons. The first is the change in the public opinion. It's real. It's real. The second is the change among our own community, i.e., the new generations of the Palestinian American community is really is confident. They know the culture. They are proud Americans and proud Palestinians. They are not concerned with survival. They are also concerned with political action. And the third is the change among the Jewish community. Many members of the Jewish community are saying, not in our name. What is this? And I encounter them on a daily basis. Leaders, youth movements. So this is a very important moment for us, and we must seize it. And that explains to you why they want to shut the office and why they want to do that, because they know it. They know where we're going.
A U.S. official was quoted as saying a peace plan will be presented to the Palestinians and Israelis, regardless if the Palestinians come to the table or not. How would the Palestinians receive such a proposal?
Say it again.
A U.S. official was quoted saying that a peace plan will be presented to the Palestinians and Israelis, whether or not the Palestinians come to the negotiating table. How would the Palestinians receive such a proposal?
We will not receive any proposal that is less of the implementation of the international and the U.S. long-held positions about the two-state solution on the 1967 borders. We will not receive any proposal 1 centimeter less of that. Next.
Thanks for your visit, Ambassador. We mentioned a lot of Trump's provocations, Jerusalem, UNRWA, and Mohammed mentioned the threat to close the PLO offices. And Palestinians have refused Vice President Mike Pence's visit. So one might imagine that the relationship between the Palestinians and the United States are breaking down. But what we saw 3 days ago with a group of activists disrupting an official meeting at the Chamber of Commerce in Bethlehem, which, by the way, is a nonviolent, popular resistance, indicates continued engagement. So the question that I want to ask, and it's really inspired from a refugee in Bethlehem, is to what extent will the Palestinian government continue to coordinate with the United States, and what aspects of the relation will stop?
No, this is a very important question. So people realize that we distinguish very clearly between the bilateral relationship. Okay, let me clarify. The U.S.-Palestinian relationship has 3 dimensions. The first dimension is the bilateral relationship. The relationship between the people of America and the people of Palestine, the government of America and the government of Palestine. This has nothing to do with the peace process. This has nothing to do with Israel. This has nothing to do with, peace plans. The second dimension is the trilateral relationship, i.e. America mediating between us and the Israelis for the last 26 years. The third and the last dimension is the multilateral dimension, i.e. America's contribution to UNRWA, America's voting in the UN Security Council, or not voting or vetoing, and what have you. These are the 3 dimensions. Now, what we have been saying is that since the announcement, America has self-inflicted on itself the role of the mediator, the second dimension, the trilateral relationship. America is disqualified now, because you cannot be a mediator if you forego the very rules and principles that you have presented to us. And you have single-handedly, unilaterally, suddenly changed the rules of engagement. And we are saying we are not interested to engage. We are not interested to engage under such rules of engagement. We're not. But we are absolutely, adamantly, strategically interested in the bilateral relationship and in the multilateral relationship. America is America. This is a very important country. It's not only a superpower, but America is not unipolar. You see the American people all over. You see the opportunities and how many people, even during the announcement on Jerusalem, thousands took off to the streets everywhere in Washington, New York, Chicago, what have you. We also are thankful for the American support to the Palestinian people and institutions. And we will always want to maintain, and not only maintain, the instructions I received from President Abbas when I was in Ramallah a few weeks ago is to double down on our efforts in the bilateral arena. Double down on our efforts on the bilateral arena and making sure that the real objective of Netanyahu, what is the objective of the Israeli Prime Minister and the government? You think by pushing in all these directions, the Jerusalem announcement, the refugees, closing of the office. What is the real objective? Three. The first is preempting President Trump himself. Believe you me, some in Israel were panicking about this ultimate, even if the ultimate deal was not really perfect for the Palestinians, the discussion in the political arena is nothing they wanted, even discussing political issues. The second is to predetermine the outcome before it even starts. You see, so the logic now. The third is to destroy the two-state solution, because Jerusalem is the heart of the very heart of the two-state solution. So if you aim a lethal shot at the heart, the body will. Because the Netanyahu government does not want a two-state solution. They see it as an existential threat. The last factor, they want to abruptly destroy the growing bilateral relationship between Palestine and the United States. Here comes your question. We will not allow that to happen. We will not allow for that to happen. We must invest more and more in our connection, outreach, relationship to the American government, representatives, the Congress, and public. And we will. This is the plan. Now, people have the right to demonstrate. People have the right for, what did you call it, non-violent protests? Yeah, they do. But we have a legal system. When somebody presents to the legal process any complaints, we will have to investigate it. And there is a very fine line that we must define it. Very fine line. We appreciate the U.S. assistance to the people of Palestine. We do. And we must distinguish, separate clearly between that and between the political track.
Unfortunately, I think we have time for one more question.
Thank you. My name is Salah Sarhan, Ambassador of Arab League in Washington. Thank you, Ambassador, for your presentation. It's a very important one. And really, we would like to encourage you to continue and saying these facts and convey to the American public opinions. I know that some Americans, they know the facts, but some of them, they would like to put their hand on their ears not to hear this fact. But we would like you to continue in that, and we are with you as the Arab League. And by the way, we have, I just had the news that a meeting today took place in the Arab League for the ministerial peace initiative held today, and they have adopted a plan or a movement plan for rejecting the Trump decision recognizing Israel. We will continue in that, and our hand with you and our heart with you. I have other question. We heard that some European countries are in the process to recognize Palestine. Some of them maybe Poland or Slovenia or Luxembourg. If that's so, what is your step or what efforts are you taking to consolidate this effort, this initiative? Thank you, Ambassador.
Well, as far as recognition, Palestine is recognized by 138 countries worldwide. What left practically is the US and Western Europe, because we are also recognized by the majority in Eastern Europe since the Soviet Union time. And in Western Europe, there has been, a country after another. So it started with Sweden, if you remember, fully recognizing the state of Palestine. And Sweden did that out of, how much Sweden as a country and as a political system is much more based on values and principles than interests and fears. And I'd like to give a hand to Sweden, actually. Also because my kids were born in Sweden. I had the honor of working with the Swedish government, the Swedish Social Democrats, for that very important moment. But the Vatican recognized the state of Palestine. And the Vatican has such a resounding symbolism for recognizing the state of Palestine. And we are asking and demanding from the rest of the European countries that if you really want to invest in the two-state solution, as you say, for all these years, you better start by recognizing the two-state solution. Because by not recognizing the two-state solution, it would be almost taken by Israel as a policy of continuing expanding and colonizing. And you have to draw a border. Now we, the Palestinians, are saying we cannot continue recognizing Israel without...
You mean to tell me that we have to have the Israelis rule and we rule too? Two-state solution? What do you mean by that?
So what I was saying is that recognition of the state of Palestine on the 1967 borders is a very important thing to do for any country, European country or otherwise, but it's Europe that we are focusing on. If they really mean to see the two-state solution being revisited, the blood is inserted again in it because it's dying in every sense, then recognition becomes the only act that makes sense. And the political and legal arena, I cannot reveal much about the other countries but there is a lot of talk. There is coordination in the Arab League, as you mentioned. There will be delegations to visit the capitals of this country. And number one on the agenda is the recognition of the state of Palestine on the 1967 borders. No, I don't mean that, sir. What I mean practically is, we would accept to establish an independent sovereign state of Palestine on the 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem fully our capital, and the right of the Palestinian refugees to go to their homes. That's the first formula, to go to their original homes. My father lost his farm in what has become Israel. I have the right to go and farm my land if I choose to, and compensate it according to international law. That's the first scenario. The second scenario, if this is not accepted, and if this continues to be unrealistic given the situation we are in, we would have to take our heads out of the sand and start listening and discussing nationally and internationally the real option of full equal rights for all the people who live in the historic land of Palestine. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you.